We're ready on our end.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year, as Sanjay said earlier. Thank you. It's good to see everyone. Before we get started with the agenda, Brandon, do you want to go ahead and open with the disclaiming qualifiers for the evening?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to provide a reminder to ensure that our COVID-19 provisions of the Kansas Open Meeting Act are met. Board members and other participants must state their names and titles each time they speak. And I will try to remind anybody who's not doing that. So pardon the interruption if that occurs. Various members of city staff are present via Zoom and also in person in attendance. We must also state our names and titles each time we speak. All motions need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on board members individually to provide their votes. And then, Madam Chair, after the vote is finished, we will need you to announce whether or not the motion carried, as well as a count of the vote. The agenda for the meeting provided instructions for how to submit public comments and how public comment would be handled. We have received written public comment, and I know that we have at least one member of the public in attendance to speak this evening. The chair will call for in-person public comment for those without technology options. And if anybody is in the room, Madam Chair, we will let you know, and we will guide them to the podium to speak following social distance and safety protocols. Finally, I want to remind everybody to please mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Excuse me. At this time, we want to go ahead and take action on the minutes from the December 10th meeting, and that would be agenda item A1. Do I hear a motion?
This board member, Stephanie Littleton, I'd like to place a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, there's been a motion on the floor from Stephanie Littleton. Is there a second?
In his seconding.
Okay, this is Chair Salvini. Sanjay seconded.
Or Jane had her hand up before I did. So yes, Jane.
Okay, is that a second then?
No, I had a comment.
Okay, well, okay.
So we have a second. So
Yeah,
I have a concern about the minutes. It's not that I think that the minutes have errors in them. It's just that the minutes don't do anything more really than, much more anyway, than reproduce the agenda. And I wonder if we couldn't ask for more detailed minutes. When I was reading these minutes, for example, we had an update by interim police chief Brixius on some issues that Stephanie had raised before and that a number of us thought were pretty important. And I don't always think that all the details from everything we do need to be in the minutes, but in this particular case, because the issue is one of the issues was the LGBTQ liaison, and effectively the report was that nothing is happening there because the police are understaffed, and certainly understandable that they don't have the people to do the job. But it seems to me that it's sort of important to the record to say that this is an initiative that the board thinks is important and that the police chief doesn't have the resources to follow through on that. So having appointed Amber Roden to that position was a great first step, but not if she doesn't have any time or ability to carry out any of the responsibilities that might make that position fruitful. So since there's nothing in the minutes except that it says we've updated that issue, it occurred to me that maybe we should have I don't want to have a long talk about it, but I just think we need more detail in the minutes so that we have some records of things that are important to us, and we can go back and look at those. I actually went back and listened to that particular meeting to be sure that I had heard it correctly. And that takes a lot longer and it's a lot harder than it would be just to have the little summary in the minutes, which seems to me we could ask for. Brandon, is that something we could ask to have done, just a little more detail in the minutes?
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. The form of our minutes, the format follows the city standard format, which is utilized by virtually every one of our advisory boards and commissions, including the City Commission. It is an action item format. We have, several years ago, we provided verbatim minutes or more detailed minutes, depending on which board or commission was meeting. And that is an exceptionally time-consuming task. And so we try to refer people to the video, which I know, as you stated, may take a little bit more time and effort. But that's the goal of this system, is to be able to provide an action item minutes, so that then people can refer to the video for more detailed discussion.
This is Jane Gibson, board member. I'd like to follow up with that. Thank you, Brandon. I certainly do have an appreciation for the time and trouble it takes to do verbatim minutes, and I would not even ask for verbatim minutes.
Right.
I'm a secretary for an international professional association, and I take the minutes, and I do almost produce verbatim minutes, and it is a hellacious job, and I'm not suggesting that anybody in the city should have to do that. But I think that our minutes don't provide any detail to help us. Otherwise, I mean, why bother with them, really? And so I would ask, unless there's some policy that forbids our getting a little more detail, that we consider some detail in the minutes. And if we can't do that, then I wonder if we couldn't have the videos indexed in some way so that it would be easier to locate the material that we want to see there. Otherwise, you might wind up watching an awful lot of video just to get to 30 seconds.
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Board Member Gibson, I believe the videos are indexed, and I should have specified. And I'll go back and check on this meeting to see if that's not the case. But that is part of the functionality of the system. Is you can go straight to an item and click on it, and that'll take you straight to the time-stamped video. So I'll go back and check and make sure that staff who is helping with the minutes for this board is actually doing that, or maybe if that was an oversight with this particular set of minutes.
Jane Gibson, board member. Brandon, do you click on it in the agenda or on the video? Is it indexed from the video, or do you have to go to the agenda to get it?
It will. I'm
asking, where is the index?
Yes, Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I'm pulling it up on the screen real quick so I can share that. Guess we don't have that meeting. Well, this is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I'm not seeing that it is enabled with that functionality. So, if you'd like, I can work with staff who helps with the minutes for this board, and we can return next month with some information about that.
Jane Gibson, board member, thank you. One or the other. I mean, either a little more detail in the minutes or indexing in the video, but we should have better access to the record, I think.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it, Brandon. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Gibson and Brandon, Assistant City Manager Brandon. This is Chair Salvini, and we have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify with aye. And I'll start with Sanjay.
Sanjay Mishra, board member. Aye.
Ginny,
Jenny, board member, aye.
Marie,
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Jane,
Board member Jane, yeah, aye.
Bill,
Board Member Graybill, aye.
Stephanie?
Board Member Stephanie Littleton, aye.
Okay, the vote is unanimous. Chair Salvini votes aye, and that's a total of 7 on the unanimous vote. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next agenda item. And that would be public comment. Stephanie, would you be interested in taking this section?
This is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. Brandon, I understand, I don't think anyone's in the meeting, in the...
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Alex Kerr is present. Alex, were you intending to provide public comment?
No, not on this agenda item, not on this.
Excellent, thank you. Vice Chair Littleton, we have nobody in attendance. We do have written public comment that was submitted and is attached to the agenda. But with that, I believe the board can move on to the next item.
Sure, I just want to make a note for the record, that we received correspondence from Mr. Watts, so that is attached to the agenda.
Very good, thank you. Okay, we're ready to move ahead to C on the agenda items. And the first agenda item is to receive the Community Engagement Subcommittee minutes of December 17th, 2020. And hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at it. We are receiving the report, and is there someone that would like to speak to the report at this time?
This is Board Member Marie Taylor. I'll speak to it since I.
Thank you.
So first, if Board Member Jenny and Board Member Sanjay have comments or want to add anything to the minutes if they don't reflect what their recollection of the meeting was, please let me know and we can make those corrections. So basically, this meeting we had was to kind of follow up on the discussions that we had at our last board meeting to think through some action items and plan out how we would develop the survey, and then just to talk with Porter Arniel about some of the logistics of that and questions we had about the survey tool, the Lawrence Listen. So that's written up in the minutes. If anyone had any questions, I see that Porter's on the call, so we can. That's great. He can provide any kind of responses back if you have questions on that aren't addressed in the minutes. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory, unless
All right,
anyone has questions.
good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. And I think
Board
before we
Member,
get started,
Stephanie
Brandon, is
Littleton,
there a
we do have
disclaimer
a
that
few
you'd like to
questions
read
for Porter. I don't know if this is a point Jane would
for this
want
evening's
to
meeting?
ask.
Is it
Yes.
playing something off the
I will
video
read
that you opened?
Just a moment. I'm having trouble reading Mr. Watts.
Okay, one away. Brandon, see if they can hear us.
Board members, can you hear us?
Yes.
Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties, I believe, on our end. I think we're okay. So sorry, I apologize for the interruption.
It was sometime in the news report.
Okay, Porter, we have a couple of questions. One is we've received some letters from citizens that we'd like to archive, maybe in some kind of a central repository, if you will, for responses that go with our Lawrence Listens and such. So is that a possibility?
You receive letters. Want to add to the Lawrence Listens survey? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what you're asking.
Yeah, we're wanting just to make sure that we are inclusive of some citizen letters that we received on feedback for the Police Review Board. So we're just wanting to kind of bring that in.
Okay, so these aren't surveys per se, these are just informational.
Right, informational letters. Yeah.
Okay, what my sense would be is that one possible option, we've done this with paper surveys. Admittedly, it's somewhat clumsy, I guess, but basically what we've done is in paper surveys and just somebody manually submits that into the survey, Lawrence Listen survey platform. That way it's captured as part of that comprehensive data package, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we just.
So that would be,
Yeah. So we can do that. Okay, that's a good thought.
Stephanie, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is Sanjay Mishra, board member. I think one of the other questions was, as we put our survey out for public feedback, we don't want to limit it only to the survey. People may send us a note, send us 5 pages, send us a half a book. We were wondering where those are going to be archived. Is that fair representation, Stephanie?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We don't have a sort of automatic method, so it's really up to you all what you want to do with that. And again, it could be put into the Lawrence Listens system if that was appropriate. Because honestly, my other thought is that if we, which we typically do, is we put out information on our social media and particularly Nextdoor. People often comment on Nextdoor about, so you'll see responses in the social media that might be of interest to you. And we can glean that. And I guess probably if I think this through, at the end of the survey, we can generate a PDF or we can generate an Excel document, a database. Perhaps there's a way to figure out where to insert that information into that database. That would probably be the most logical way to go.
Okay, thanks, Porter. Here's another question, I think one from Jane. Will the Likert scale responses be analyzed automatically? I think our thoughts are we're not wanting them to necessarily update live on the site because that may influence the subsequent responses.
Yeah, and any questions that we ask in the survey can be turned on or off so that they either reveal the data or we can turn that off.
Okay. Very well. One question regarding confidentiality. Can we make a statement up front? Responses will be anonymous, or at least ask if respondents want the responses to be anonymous?
Both are possible. At this point, we typically do all anonymous. If you wanted to allow people to identify themselves, we can certainly have that option through a registration. But my sense with this one is that you probably want it to be anonymous, and we can do that.
Okay, very well. Last one I have is, can we see the clean formatted survey before it goes live on Lawrence Listens? And can we pre-test it maybe with the board?
Yes, you can see it. The pre-testing is a little tricky in that when we make the Lawrence Listens survey live, anything that gets entered into it is basically locked into that database of information. We can.
We're losing him.
Yeah. Stephanie, at this point,
Go ahead.
do we want to? Oh,
I was just going to say, it sounds like he's going to say that it was going to count. It's going to be counted in. So
I was going to suggest something.
Yeah, go ahead, Son.
yes, Board Member Sanjay.
Board member Sanjay Mishra, if Porter is listening, I know his voice is cut out. What I would suggest is call it a different survey, give it a different name so that this data is trashed out. And then when we do the community listening, we call it under the real name.
Okay.
So the data is not contaminated.
Okay, very good. This is Chair Salvini. I'm wondering if some of these issues won't come up, that we can elaborate on some of these things when we review the revised communications plan. What are your thoughts? So this is a report that we want to receive. I'm going to go back to the process here. this is a report that provides us information on what the committee discussed in the last meeting. And then in that, they revise the communications plan, which will be presented on agenda item number 3. And we can further elaborate and ask questions and get clarifications on the plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this board member, Stephanie Littleton, is it possible that we just move that up so we can keep them consistent together, and then does that make sense before we move on to the ordinance?
Yeah, it does. Sure it does. Is there a motion to move ahead to agenda item 3 and following the receiving, and we'll formally receive the minutes. I want to say that, so we'll need to do that step before we get into the revised communications plan and start looking at the the draft survey. Mm-hmm. Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson, I'd like to move that we reorder the agenda to move that item up.
Okay, there's a motion to move item number 3 up and to make that number 2, and that will be the second item on the agenda we'll dovetail into or move on into. Is there a second?
Sanjay Mishra, board member, second.
There's a second. Okay, all those in favor, aye. All those opposed, nay. We'll start with Sanjay.
Sanjay Mishra, board member, aye.
Board Member Jenny. Board Member Jenny.
Board Member Jenny Robinson, aye.
Okay. Board Member Marie.
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board Member Jane.
Board Member Jane Gibson, aye.
Board Member Bill.
Board Member Graybill, aye.
Board Member Stephanie.
Board member Stephanie Littleton, aye.
And Board Member Salvini, aye. And that's a total unanimous vote of 7-0. So we've just passed a motion to move number 3 on up to number 2. And at this point, if you all feel comfortable with this, I'd like to go ahead and formally receive the report from the group so we can move on to go ahead and discuss the revised communication plan, which I believe is a product of the work that we are reviewing and accepting. So is there a motion to accept the subcommittee report presented by Marie and group? Sanjay?
Yes, I move to receive the report, please.
Okay, very good. There's a motion to receive the report this evening. Is there a second? Stephanie?
Board member Stephanie Littleton, I second that motion.
Okay, Stephanie Littleton, board member, seconds that. Let's go ahead and take a vote to receive the report. Signify with aye and opposed nay. Board member Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member, aye.
Sanjay. Board member Jenny?
Board Member Jenny Robinson, aye.
Board member Marie?
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board member Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson, aye.
Board member Bill?
Board Member Graybill, aye.
And board member Stephanie?
Board member Stephanie Littleton, aye.
Okay, very good. And Chair Salvini, aye. 7-0 unanimously votes to receive the report. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and then move into the revised communications plan. And again, this is a revised plan from the group to present to the meeting tonight. We'll start discussing it, but I would recommend that we also start the conversation to bring the narrative for the survey in and have a presentation from the group on the survey. Okay, so let's take a moment to look at that revised communications plan and pull that up. And Marie, would you like to walk us through that?
Sure. This is Board Member Marie Taylor. So there aren't that many changes. What we did is we took out some of the language that was not approved by consensus, and then added in some additional steps in the timeline to include communication with neighborhood associations, and then what we had conceived of as a rollout through social services and nonprofit organizations, hard copies, to have hard copies available, and then also to use our own internal networks of folks that we know who we could send this out, the survey out to have further distribution. So it was more, the changes were more on thinking through additional ways that we could get the survey out in the community.
Okay, very good. And it's a result of the conversation that we had around it from the last meeting too. Acknowledged that you presented that in the beginning of the report. Okay, is there any discussion? Because I'll recommend that we move down to communication outreach tools available, and that would be the segue to introduce the team that worked on that survey, and that would be board members Jane, Sanjay, and Stephanie, right?
Yes.
Did Marie
Okay.
take,
Yes, Marie.
because to avoid having a open meeting amongst ourselves, we broke this into chunks. So parts of us did.
Right.
But so this is our first time meeting collectively to look at everyone's work. So it's not exactly, hasn't coalesced yet. So if that's.
Absolutely. Thank you, and good point. We're so careful about following those, and I appreciate that, because this is the first time we're able to work collaboratively on this to bring that together. And let me know if I'm wrong in this, but I'm thinking that tool certainly would be representative in that section of communication outreach tools available. Correct? Okay. All right. So. Is it okay with the group, nod of heads, to go ahead and go into the survey then, and discussion and presentation? Bill?
I've got this group board member Grable on the communication outreach tools. I was wondering if it would have any value, if it's possible, to put something in that flyer they always send out with the water bills, something to the effect that this survey exists, and the city welcomes comments on it, and put a link in there to it.
On the e-bills and the paper bills, Bill? Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, wherever that flyer is, I
Sure.
get it. Place.
This Marie Taylor, board member, we did request that kind of publicity.
What's kind of? I like that.
Very hard. So, and I think that came up in our past minutes of the subcommittee, in terms of how much notoriety we can pull for ourselves through our activities, use of the flame. We did have some discussion about how we could get onto the Twitter account for the police department. All of these ideas that, at least initially, were nixed, but I'm willing to give it another go.
So what's the answer to my question? No or yes?
This is Porter O'Neill. I'm hoping you all can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm going to leave my video off because I think that's a problem. To answer your question, some of that depends on timing, because the utility billing process is a 6-week out process, if that makes sense. So we have to get it printed and submitted to a distribution point. So a lot of that would be dependent on timing. I want to be clear. Are you talking about putting it, there's a notification spot on the actual utility bill?
No,
which might be feasible. Putting it in the flame. Again, with timing, I think there certainly is a possibility.
So,
Okay, Board Member Sanjay?
so Porter, this is Sanjay Mishra, board member. Porter, our wish would be to generate as much awareness, attention as possible. And however best you think, so if it's a flyer in the bill, physical flyer, that's fine. If there's a spot on the bill, if there's a link on the city website, wherever we can do it, I would take that spot.
Understood.
Okay, hopefully we can get Porter back here in a little bit. Really, the intent is to take it out as much as possible, make it as ubiquitous as possible in terms of accessibility. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, Bill, for bringing that up. Board Member Gibson?
Board Member Jane Gibson. Well, since you mentioned accessibility, we had discussed in our group some accessibility issues. The survey is only in English, for example. Sanjay had mentioned the importance of reaching out to people who have other kinds of accessibility issues, like may perhaps have visual impairment. I don't know how the city can help us with that, with these problems, but we would like to be able to reach a diverse audience. And I guess Porter is off for a bit, but and he would be the one to have the answer, I suppose.
When he gets back on, we'll take a pause and close that loop with him. Okay. Sanjay,
Sanjay Mishra, board member. So it was accessibility issues as far as shortcomings, and then also with language. So does it only have to be English? Can it at a minimum be at least in Spanish?
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I believe Porter is back with us by phone instead of over the internet. Porter, is that you that just logged in?
That is me.
Okay, great. We can hear you loud and clear. Porter, the question comes from Board Member Gibson about accessibility as well as translation to different languages and what the functionality is or capability is using the Lawrence Listens tool. Can you brief us a little bit about that?
Yes, this is Porter Arneal, Communications and Creative Resources Director. On the Lawrence Listen side, that's a very good question. I don't have a direct answer. The city subscribes to a translation service. So conceivably, we could translate the survey into, a grand number of languages. There's a whole list of languages this company can provide. How that goes into the Lawrence Listen survey, I don't know. The other thing I'm thinking, honestly, is I know that with accessibility high on our radar for everything we're doing, you can translate our website both via Google, and actually it's on our website that you can make translations. Whether you can do that with Lawrence Listens, I honestly don't know, but let me check.
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Porter, I have tried to do that to translate one of the actual Lawrence Listens surveys, and the translation button, the translation option seems to translate everything that's on our website, but the embedded Lawrence Listens system does not translate with that. But as Porter said, board members, it's something we can look into to see if that's functionality we have access to. But at this point, currently, that's not functionality that's set up.
So,
Board Member Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member. So the reason Brandon and Porter and the other board members, we were looking for this is because the population which gets impacted most by this may have those issues.
Absolutely.
So we want to be as equitable as possible and inclusive.
Understood.
All right, very good, thank you. Any other comments or expectations, I guess, going forward? If not, do we want to go ahead and, under communication outreach tools available, go ahead and introduce the survey at this time? The narrative, and that would be Sanjay and Jane and Stephanie.
So, Sanjay Mishra, board member, I would introduce it, and here's my request of the board members is that help us if the 6 topics that we have picked are not enough, or you have something else which you think we should be talking about. And then as Stephanie also mentioned, we are looking for pulling in recommendations of organizations that this survey should go out to, so we get enough information participation. And we're looking for general comments, and we will take it to the city staff also if they have any issues with the survey. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we'd like from you is a consent to go ahead and polish the survey and share it with Porter, so that we can then try the mechanics on Lawrence Listens, because that could be a tricky, I have not done it ever, but that could be tricky too. So those were my asks on behalf of the subcommittee. Is that Jane and Stephanie, if you want to add anything?
Very good. Thank you, Sanjay. Hold on just a minute. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to pull up the draft survey. And that would be, and just go ahead and have that for reference in front of you. Okay, thank you. Jane, Stephanie?
This is Stephanie, a little time, I would just add, Sanjay kind of laid it out very well. Kind of what we're looking for this evening is if you find that we're missing a subject or a topic, if you will, from our ordinance, really looking for high-level comments back, either to the topics and or to the questions and how those have been created.
This is Board Member Marie Taylor.
Right.
So, first, I want to thank you for pulling that. This is not an easy task to think of these survey questions. So I want to just thank you for the time and effort you put into these, which is evident for sure. And I guess I just wanted to say generally, so I had drafted up a potential like summary of the changes, and that's also in the backup. But what I learned from that, it was and how to approach it. It was basically what we had kind of mirrored the discussions we'd had with Dr. Faris Mohammed, who's the new Chief Equity Diversity. I'm not getting his title right, but you know who I'm talking about. Who had given us the suggestion that however we approach it, that we think about different levels of education, different cultural backgrounds, and so that we should write it in the way that was the most user-friendly and easiest to understand across all sorts of education levels. So I guess like my first kind of substantive comment is how we could word it in a way that hits a certain, he actually said like you should write towards a certain grade level so that you know that everyone can understand it. And so I would say like we just have to be really like mindful that we don't write sentences that are too complicated or require some sort of technical knowledge about what we're trying to accomplish. And so like for instance, like calling it an ordinance maybe doesn't mean anything to just community members, as you know. So like those sorts of like kind of words that we've now become accustomed to hearing because we've been deep in the weeds on this. So I think that generally if we get ways to simplify our language, that might be helpful to make it more accessible and people won't get tired as they read it because it might be difficult to digest. So I think that's just like a general comment that I had kind of took in when I was trying to write up some suggested summary.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Board Member Gibson?
Board Member Gibson, we can do that. Thank you.
Very good.
That was good.
So, go ahead,
No,
Sanjay.
I was going to tell Murray that we didn't take it to the Flash reading index score, but I know it's kind of dropped. Whatever it is, we will see. But that's a great point. Always write it at the 7th, 8th grade level, max.
This is Chair Salvini. An observation I want to make, and certainly I want to really support and repeat what Marie said earlier, and that's thank you for the work that you all have done on this. I think the 6 categories cover everything. I think that's important. And I want to point out that in reading the draft survey that probably the places, and this may come up again too, that we probably need so much feedback would be item numbers 3 and 4 on what the community expects us, to really deal with complaints, right? So I just wanted to point that out and make that comment. Board Member Jenny.
Yeah, Board Member Jenny Robinson. I think to me the survey is very important, but I think because one of our goals is educating the public about what we do, the introduction and the purpose of the survey are also incredibly important. And I wanted to draw a parallel between and also thank the survey drafters. This is just, I can't imagine the amount of work that went into this, so thank you. I wanted to kind of draw a parallel between the draft survey introduction and, if you have them both up on your computer, the first paragraph or 2 of the draft summary that Marie composed. I find I like the perspective that Marie's comes from as a community member who might be interested in police accountability. It maybe turns me off a little bit to read in the first sentence that our goal is to promote positive community police relations. I think, yes, that is a goal of ours, but if you read in, like Marie, the first 2 paragraphs of Marie's summary, to review appeals, and, regarding community police relations, I kind of like how that's worded a little bit better. Sorry, there's a lot to say. But.
Okay, other comments, feedback? Marie and then Jane.
So this is Marie Taylor, board member. I think now the challenge is how do we merge the different parts
Bring it together. Mm-hmm.
I think some of it is my proposed introduction is more informal, but and then overlaps with the introduction for the survey. So I don't know. We hadn't really talked about how we would integrate these aspects.
Yeah.
The Lawrence Listens, or whether it's like, here's the survey, here's the introduction, and then you click, and then the survey tells you is a separate, like the introduction then leads you to the survey, and then the survey has more formal introduction of the actual ordinance, or if we want to even talk about it in those terms, because it might be that we're getting too technical to kind of elicit the comments we want back, because I think what we're doing is different than the kind of feedback we want to get from the actual action items that we're seeking to have comment on. because they're not really, I feel as if like the general public is not like, you're doing what with an ordinance? What's an ordinance?
Top left.
No, I think it's more like you want to do what? You want to review complaints? Okay, tell me more. So I think that's where, well, we'll have to kind of figure out how to make sense of what the parts we've trying to put together.
Okay. Thank you. Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. I think you should look at the intro that we put on the draft survey as a placeholder because we knew that you all had drafted one. I read the introduction that the other committee, Community Engagement Committee wrote, and I like a lot of things about that introduction. I think it should be shorter, because what we don't want is an introduction that's an impediment to participation in the survey. So I think it should be sort of short and sweet.
Right.
And the other comment I would make is about the summary of key proposed changes to the Community Police Review Board down there. We had discussed this before, and maybe I misremember it. But the issue really is that very few people probably will know anything about the previous ordinance. So it isn't really necessarily useful to say, here are the changes that we're proposing if they are unfamiliar with the previous ordinance. And my assumption is that most people are not. And maybe that's an incorrect assumption, but I think that most people are not aware even that there was an ordinance creating this CPRB, let alone that we have undertaken this effort to try to revise it to make ourselves more useful to the community. So I am reluctant to go there to talk about this in terms of change, because again, I see that almost as an impediment to people's participation. What I do like about it is sort of the list of key components in the revision.
Right.
I just don't think they need to be written as though they change from something to something. More to the point, I think, for people's interest in what we're doing, is probably the little, the prompts that go before the questions on the surveys, we wrote them. And those could certainly be modified to pick up these key points and the way that they're written on the, I'm sorry, what is this document called? The survey, introduction and summary. But so anyway, that's just my view that the comparison is probably more distraction than it is helpful. But I like the way that they're written, and I think those key points could certainly be integrated as the prompts to the questions.
Okay, very good. Board Member Marie?
Board Member Marie Taylor. So I think I'm on the same page. So I think that if I'm hearing and understanding correctly, is that we take the information that's in the summary that was used to describe the changes, and then we just plug them into where they would fall with the question to elicit the questions, right? So we don't have to have a separate section that says summary of key changes. Instead, that same flavor of text is then put in where those questions fall in line with in the survey. So they're useful. I didn't waste my time drafting them.
No, not
at all.
They and the little prompt, Board Member Jane Gibson, those and the prompts for the questions are very similar because they focus on the key issues. So what we could do is just kind of create some amalgam of the two to be sure that we have a very clear prompt at a level that we believe is intellectually accessible to a wider population, and I think that would be our goal.
Okay, so given the comments that we've seen and the documents that we've reviewed, do we want to then, next step on this, have a merging to the final document of this then? And I guess some of that depends on timeline, which we do need to talk about too, which will be another discussion. So what's the pleasure of the board at this point, knowing what we know and working in the two groups together and what you've presented in this area, in this section? Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member. So I've given this summary and introduction for use to cut and paste or to make changes to in line with what we've talked about tonight is completely fine with me. I'm not taking ownership of it. We just needed to get something on paper. Yeah. So in terms of short and sweet, there's certainly ways to make that shorter, and I have no problem with that. I think we're on the same page.
Okay, Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson. Actually, I thought Sanjay was probably going to respond here. So Sanjay, would you like to respond according to the discussion that you and Stephanie and I had about what we would like from the board at this point? Or do you want me to go ahead?
No, I said that at the end also. And what we'd like is consent of the board so that we polish the survey based on the discussion we have had today. And then we wanted to get it to Porter as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Is that fair,
Stephanie, any
Jane?
comment? Oh, thank you. Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
This board member, Stephanie Lawson, I think, so if I'm clear, I know we wanted to get the general comments so we can kind of keep moving on. I don't know if we need to receive anything beyond that. But I'll let Marie go ahead. She's got a thought on this real quick.
Okay, sure, yeah. Marie, go ahead.
Marie Taylor, and I would suggest that the survey subcommittee, I've just coined that term now, would also get in touch with Dr. Mohammed, because he had graciously offered to read through whatever we produced to kind of touch on those kind of equity issues that we've been discussing.
Okay, it sounds like then we are in agreement. I hear consensus that the intent and the content here moves to where we want to achieve the data from the survey, right? And that there are some issues with regard to accessibility, approachability, that really could be cleaned up here a little bit without changing the intent or the content of the survey. Keeping in mind, I think your point was real important, Jane, and that is that introducing an element of trying to help the audience understand we're changing from this to this is too complicated, and really could get in the way of really just getting some feedback from the public. And I think that's a good point as well. So I think going forward, and then also with regard to time, Sanjay, in terms of what you said, I'm going to just say I feel comfortable as a member of this group to take the feedback that we have right now, and I would feel good about a document that the group could come together by merging the ideas and the content to a final survey. Any comments, or Jane? Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say we probably need a motion and a vote.
Yeah.
On whatever the board decides.
I think
we're going to need to vote on it, probably.
Moving in that direction. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. So if there's no more discussion, and certainly we can have discussion after the motion's made. Is there a motion? Sanjay?
I would move that we let the subcommittee handle or incorporate the suggestions and finalize the survey and share it with the Porter.
Okay. There's a motion to incorporate all of the discussion points and considerations, as well as the content in the documents that are presented tonight, to pull it together. Probably visit with the, I'm going to add the other issue into the motion too, to visit with the new equity officer, right? Right, to go ahead and finalize a document and turn it over to Porter. And so that's the motion. Is there a second? Jenny?
Board Member Jenny Robinson. I just noticed in the chat box that Alex Kerr has requested to make a comment. And I don't
Okay,
know.
We do have a motion on the floor. Thank you. We will address that. We do have a motion. Can we go ahead and get a second?
Board Member Jenny Robinson, I second that motion.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you, Jenny. So we're open to discussion. Now, this might be a point of order. With regard to discussion, I see hands up. Can this be a point to go ahead and have some public comment in Assistant City Manager Mcguire?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Yes, Madam Chair, you can really proceed as you wish at this point. Take additional comments or discussion from the board members, as well as public comment.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I saw some hands up. I see Marie and Bill.
Oh, so, Board Member Marie Taylor. I just wanted to point out as part of our agenda that Board Member Jenny Robinson had drafted draft invitation language. We discussed about having some kind of a boilerplate language that board members could utilize if they would like when sending out to their contacts copies of the survey. So that's out there for your review too. And Jenny has her hands up.
Very good. Jenny, did you want to talk about that?
Just a little aside, Board Member Jenny Robinson. So I also have the Excel spreadsheet of nonprofits and organizations that we're going to reach out to. We didn't include that in the agenda because there are some names and phone numbers, but that's something that we'll go over as well. And I was planning to kind of just review the invitation at that time.
Very good. All right. Very good. Thank you. Bill, Board Member Bill Graybill.
This is Board Member Graybill. I'm not sure I understand this motion. If one were to vote for it, is one voting to approve a document that I haven't seen yet? Is that the gist of the motion?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Jane?
All I need to know.
Board Member Jane.
Jane?
Well, I was going to say no, but maybe that is the ultimate effect of it. The motion was just to authorize the subcommittee to integrate the changes that have arisen in this discussion this evening, just to trust the subcommittee that it can pull this together the way that the CPRB wants us to do it, and then take it on to Porter so that we don't have to spend another meeting bringing it back and getting the board to review it again. I mean, for us, it was just a question of efficiency.
Does that answer, Bill?
I'm not sure it does answer. I just need to know, if I voted for this, would I be voting for a document to be presented to the public that I have not seen yet? Is that a yes or a no?
I think it's a yes.
Well, thank you.
I think it's a yes too. Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, board member. I would say you would see it because we would run a trial by you. And if we found egregious mistakes, we would not submit it to the public. So absolutely. But if we had a the here instead of an and here, I think we would accept that and let it go. We can make changes till everything gets done. But we wanted to become efficient in process-wise, is to move it to the next step so it starts seeing an outside shape.
Okay, Bill?
That's all right. I don't need people telling me what I think or what I see or what I know. I can figure that out on my own.
Okay, I would like to, at this point, at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Alex Kerr.
Good evening. I'm Alex Kerr. My team and me have been laser focused in this, and I think this board has also. A lot of the things that the board brought up today was very valuable information and things we have written down some things that we have concerned, but that has been figured out. I do still think that this is a process, and that will we will get here. I do say to the board that you should approve this. Yes to the motion. Sorry, I'm talking to my team. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kerr. Okay, so we've got a motion and let's on the floor with a second. And again, once again, I think to clarify what we talked about earlier, Jane, go ahead.
Sorry, Tanya, that Jane Gibson, board member. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say that, you know, for us, this was a matter of efficiency, and because we've been at this for so long and we're tired and we'd like to move it. We'd like to see some progress towards getting this ordinance in the hands of the city commission. And this is one small step in a much, you know, longer process. And so, I mean, that's really where we were coming from on this. But if it's the pleasure of the board that you see the survey and review it again, and I mean, you know, we can do it that way. You know, there was nothing here that was meant to be sinister. We're just trying to make some progress. So if the board would like to see it again, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, board member Marie Taylor.
Board member Marie Taylor. So I don't feel like I need to, I think you have enough direction from the board to proceed. I don't think we need to see it again. I'm comfortable so long as it's Dr. Muhammad has an opportunity to weigh in and give some comment, especially on the issues that we've discussed in terms of kind of paring down the language so it's digestible and easy for people to stay engaged with the survey, that it's not too technical. I think that will accomplish what I see in the final version. So that's all. And if you're working with Porter, I'm feeling very comfortable.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Marie. Jane?
Board member Jane Gibson. I may be the only one who doesn't have it, but can somebody get us the contact information for Dr. Muhammad?
Assistant Manager Brandon?
Yes, Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I would request that you let me know when you're ready to meet with him or run a document by him, and I can arrange for that meeting with Ferris.
Thank you.
And
very good. Once again,
sorry, Tanya, I might add, Jane, if you would like to just go ahead and connect with me tomorrow, anytime tomorrow, we can go ahead and schedule that. So.
Well, board member Jane Gibson, Brandon, the subcommittee is going to need to revise the document first, and I'm not sure how long that's going to take. Yes. So I'm a little reluctant to try to schedule it before we have a chance to know how long we're going to need to get this into shape.
That's just fine.
Okay, but I will contact you as soon as we have something. Thank you very much for helping us with this.
Very good, thank you. Board member Graybill?
This is Board Member Graybill. Chairman, can you tell me specifically what this motion is so I know what I'm voting on?
Yeah, we're going to circle around and get back to that after that's where I was going to go here in just a minute, but I see another hand up. Thank you. Stephanie?
This board member, Stephanie Littleton, you can move on.
Stephanie, was your hand up? Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, let's circle back and talk about that motion real quickly. Sanjay, do you want to go ahead and restate the motion?
I don't have it written down, Madam Chair, but I can try to.
Okay.
I can try to remember. All the gist was that we will incorporate the discussions about the survey that we have had, run it by Mr. Muhammad, and then share it with Porter.
Okay. Right, and so the incorporation that you're talking about there, just to clarify in the motion, incorporating the feedback tonight in the discussions, the expectations that we have in terms of the approachability, that really, I believe we feel comfortable in the content and that will be covered from the drafted documents that folks provided tonight. And they're pretty consistent, a little different in language, but I think everyone's clear. At least I see clarity between Marie and Jane, who did some work on these documents. And so I think moving forward, it would be in the spirit of efficiency to trust the board members to go ahead and produce a document based on, again, those discussions as well as the documents that we have in front of us. Bill?
Once this document is produced, what does the motion propose to have done with it then?
Oh, okay. Well, I think what I've heard tonight is that once that document is completed and is met with the new ethics, or equity officer for the city, then it would go on to Porter to be prepared to go to the data outlets that we want it to go to. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Board member Stephanie Littleton stepped right before going to Porter. We're going to Dr. Muhammad. And then at what point are we going to be pre-testing it? If that's post-Porter or?
Post-Porter.
Okay.
To be tested with Porter?
Yeah, so it comes to Porter, Sanjay Mishra, board member, it comes to Porter for implementation. And the trial run will be with the board members.
Okay. All right, Jane, and then Bill.
And Gibson, board member. I was just going to say that when it comes to the board, that is an opportunity. If you see something that we've missed, that's another opportunity for us to make adjustments to it before Porter would have it, right? But because Porter will help us do the pretest. But we don't publish it until after the pretest and we know we've got the language right. Does that sound right?
And then once again, we're the participants in the pretest,
well,
correct?
we would like to invite you to do that. You seem to be a pretty good crowd for this purpose.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Board Member Graybill?
This is Board Member Grable. So after this pretest, if a board member objects to it, what happens? Does it come back to the board for further consideration?
Jane?
Jane Gibson, board member. At this moment, that's not a part of the motion, but Bill could make a friendly amendment and we could build that in if you'd like us to.
Mm-hmm. Is there a friendly amendment, Bill?
Not at this time, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got a motion, a second. Let's go ahead and vote. Aye for a yay and nay for no. Board Member Sanjay?
Board member Sanjay Mishra, aye.
Board Member Jenny?
Board member Jenny Robinson, aye.
Board Member Marie?
Board member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board Member Jane?
Board member Jane Gibson, aye.
Board Member Bill?
Board Member Graybill, nay.
Okay. Board Member Stephanie?
Board member Stephanie Littleton, yes.
Okay. And Chair Salvini, yes. So we've got 6 yeses and 1 no on the record for this motion. And the motion passes. Okay. I think we're good to wrap up agenda item number 3. Is there any transition comment moving to the next agenda item? Go ahead, Stephanie and then Jenny.
Yeah, this is board member Stephanie Littleton. I think this may be a good time to ask Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. per conversation that we had recently, my understanding that the Citygate is going to be initiating and implementing a pretty large public engagement, which is going to be a survey and very, very involved sometime in February. So I guess I was just asked if you could provide, some context to that, and then that gives our board some idea. Do we want to expedite this process and try to do ours beforehand, or do we put that clear at the backside of the consultant study? So, Brandon, if you don't mind.
Yes, this is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Thank you. I'm happy to provide an update. I did post a memo to the City Commission agenda. I believe you all have a link to that, and that's more retrospective, looking at what's been accomplished over the last couple months working with the consultant. So I'll leave it to each of you to review that memo on your own. Quite a bit of work has gone into the early parts of the project so far, and we're really at a point now where the consultant is just about ready to start the public engagement process. And so if you recall back when we put together the RFP and went through the consultant selection process, public engagement was a major component of the project as we envisioned it back then. And we are designing a process, and I wish that we had a complete plan ready to present. It's still in draft form, and we don't feel comfortable presenting it publicly yet. But I do want to, to emphasize that we're making a big investment in public engagement as part of this project, and it will be. I believe it will probably end up rivaling our City Commission strategic planning public engagement process, which was, if any of you were involved in that, was a substantial undertaking. Right now, we have a list of individuals and organizations, and we're having a hard time whittling it down, but I can tell you there's about 130 plus rows of contacts on that list, and it only keeps growing every time we meet to whittle it down. So we're working on prioritizing, and especially prioritizing consistent with our strategic plan commitments. And I would point to two commitments in particular, which are the commitments around community engagement and also about equity and inclusion. Leading with race and with marginalized community members first, to make sure that we really capture those voices and gives good space for those community members, those people of color, those people from marginalized groups, to be able to have access to the consultants and access to this engagement process. And really, that's how we'll be making our prioritization decisions. But we don't want to say no. If somebody wants to provide input, then we want to be able to accommodate that. And so what we did with our city strategic plan process was actually create a team of city employees, and we call it the Lawrence Listens team, just kind of building on that brand. And we create sort of a kind of a meeting in a box, as I like to call it. And so this will enable us to have a consistent questionnaire and run a consistent meeting, regardless of which city employee goes out and does this. And so that gives us a chance to go out and get input on a questionnaire from virtually as many groups or people as we want. And that is really what helped us. Whenever we have a consultant running a project like this, you're paying consultant fees. And our city employees, what we found, are obviously very capable of going out and running meetings, especially when they have an organized guide and a consistent questionnaire to do that, and then a consistent process to submit their notes back to the consultant in a template where every template from every meeting is the same, follows the same template. And so we found that to be a really effective way to multiply our reach and multiply the number of meetings that we can have, contacts that we can make around the community. And so we really are envisioning a very broad-reaching public engagement process, and that we're really ready to go right after the beginning of February. And so I would just add a couple more notes. One is that we will have a website that the consultant is building right now, and that will provide information about that project, as well as an email address for people who want to submit input that way, or contact the consultant, directly to provide their own input directly through that email address. And then the last thing that I would say is that we will also make use of the Lawrence Listens tool as part of our engagement process, and we'll certainly do our best not to conflict with the timeline of the board survey, out of concern that could cause some confusion. The last thing that I'll say, and then I'll stop talking and stand for questions, but the Police Review Board, and I know each of you have had an opportunity to meet with the consultants once so far. We would envision the members of this board, as well as some other boards, for example, the Human Relations Commission, having opportunities to participate in some of the public engagement meetings that we're running through the consultant process. There will be most likely some kind of what I refer to as sort of come-all meetings, where it's a big invitation, a big net, and everybody's welcome. I think that would be a great opportunity to run that as a public meeting, and all 7 of you could be there, as well as other appointed advisory board members or members of the city commission. It is common for us to run meetings like that as part of consultant-led studies. And that would also give you some face time with potentially very large groups of people. Of course, we're doing all this by Zoom, but potentially very larger groups of people. And so whether it's the big public meetings or other opportunities throughout that engagement process, we want to be sure to give you some opportunities to participate as well, regardless of any decisions you make about your own public engagement process specific to the board.
Okay, comments, questions? Board Member Gibson.
Board Member Jane Gibson. Brandon, do you have a date for that survey to go live on the Lawrence Listen site? I mean, that would be the deadline for, I guess maybe that would be a closing date for our own if we thought we could handle this in just a couple of weeks, because this is, today's the 14th, and you said 1st of February. Is that your go live date, February 1?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. No, we actually, in discussions with the consultant so far, we're anticipating the survey occurring later in the engagement process, so that we could sort of use that as a tool to follow back up and on some of the themes that we want to dig into deeper, based on the listening sessions. We can use Lawrence Listen's survey as a way to do that. And so we would envision it coming later in that public engagement process. So that would be more like the end of February or sometime later in March, actually.
Jane?
Board member following up. Thank you, Brandon. So we would have, as the board had discussed in our last meeting, we might have as a month. Say we would like to get finished by end of February or at the latest. I think we said something about the middle of March last time, but we could finish it up sooner, especially if your survey is going to go on at the end of February. So that would give us about a month to get ours to run our survey. Does that sound about right to this board? I guess I'm asking my colleagues on the board.
Sure. So there were some concerns, I think, in terms of making sure there weren't redundancies or burnout, from citizens, or blending or conflating or, any of those things. So I want to thank Brandon for giving us that update, but there's some things to discuss with regard to the timeliness of both the Citygate engagement with the community and ours as well.
This is Assistant City Manager, Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I would take the opportunity to point out, Jenny does have a list of organizations, which I assume is a kind of a starter list, but I wanted to share that I compared your list to our list, and all of those organizations were already on our list in some form or fashion. And so, that was already an example of where we might have, two different touches around very much the same issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jenny?
You had mentioned potentially moving on to the next section. And before we moved on, I wanted to make sure that we looked over the invitation as well as that kind of working document of organizations that we'd like to reach out to.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jenny, you wanted to present that list to us, or?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Board member Jenny Robinson. So we had discussed reaching out with some paper copies of surveys, and there's also been some discussion of reaching out to neighborhood organizations, et cetera, without wanting to stretch ourselves too thin. So I have just kind of drafted a starter list based on my knowledge, as well as going off of, I believe Porter recommended looking at the library's list of local nonprofits and organizations. So if it's all right with everyone, I could go ahead and share my screen and we could go through that together. Does that sound good? Okay. I'm a little nervous sharing my screen with the board here.
Yeah, be sure and close a few windows or something.
Okay, so can you see everything? All right.
It's coming across very clear.
Yes.
Okay, good. I've zoomed in a little bit. All right. So as you can see, this is a small list, but I'm a realist. And so I want to make sure that we are targeted and get organizations that would really do a good job of sampling, a large spectrum of our community members. So I can't see anyone's hands raised. So I think, Tanya, you can see if someone's raising their hand and let me know. So I guess we can just start from the top. So what I did, just a basic list, listing the organization, the contact person, contact phone number, email, and the board member assigned. And then the date that we distribute, the date that we collect the surveys, just to keep it nice and organized. So, all right. So I listed the library because that would be a good place to have the surveys out just on the tables in that cafe area. Also maybe by the computers in the computer lab downstairs. So I thought the Director of Development and Community Partnerships would be a good person to reach out to do this. I wanted to give someone else the opportunity to engage with the library if they're interested. Any volunteers? All right, I can do this one.
Board member Marie Taylor, of course, I'll reach out to the library.
Okay. Sorry, Marie, I couldn't see you. Okay. All right, and if you, obviously, if you have another contact to the library, that's just fine. I just thought that would be the best, seemed like the most applicable person. Bert Nash, I've already reached out for contact info and we'll talk with them. I'm interested in getting staff as well as potentially clients involved because staff would have a lot of working knowledge of the needs of individuals with severe and persistent mental illness as well. Also, with the thought of looking at the homeless outreach team camp that's been set up. So, Dare Center, I'll reach out to. Catholic Charities, I'll reach out to ECAN. Independence Inc. I thought would be a really good one. And I believe I haven't assigned anyone to that one. I don't know if anyone has connections with Independence Inc. and would be interested in reaching out to them to discuss the distribution of surveys. I'm able to reach out to them.
Jenny, I'll switch you. I'll take, this is Tanya Salvini. I will be glad as you're going down the list to let you know what I'd be interested in to relieve you a little, if that's of interest to you. Okay.
Oh, no worries. So the community shelter, I've got contacts there, so I'll do that one, as well as Recovery and Hope Network. Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center. I had my name. Is that one that you're
I could take that one, right? Uh-huh.
Okay. I spell your last name correct. Willow Domestic Violence Center. And then these are, here's where I get out of my level of knowledge. So we're interested in getting connected with the Haskell student body as well as staff. I didn't know if anyone had suggestions for how to reach out.
I can do that.
Okay. Right. As well as KU students, I know we had discussed reaching out to them.
Sanjay?
But I don't know.
I could help with the KU student body, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how it'll be propagated, but at least we can get them involved.
Right.
And paper surveys won't be super applicable to them either, as well as the Haskell students. You know, not all of these have to be paper surveys. But,
Sure.
Okay.
Ours would need to be virtual for sure. On the Black Student Union, and I don't know if Sanjay wants to take that, but in general, the Multicultural Center there just next to the union, that really reaches out to the huge diversity of subgroups or groups that are on campus. So the LGBTQI group, multi-ethnic groups. The Black Student Union is also out of that kind of hub as well. So that's correct, right, Jane and Sanjay? Marie?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of our students at Haskell work with those groups up there. They also, the Native American group is out of that cultural center as well.
Okay. I had a hard time finding like updated contact info for all those different student groups.
Sure.
This year has been weird, but does anyone, and you said it's the KU Multicultural Center?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have contacts there or able to reach out to?
Do I know? I don't know.
Looking at my KU folks. I mean, I'm able to do a little digging and see if there's a central contact number to reach out to see. But I would definitely be open to anyone else doing.
Yeah, I think there's a director, I believe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Not sure.
All right. And so I might just, since the Black Student Union is kind of housed with the KU Multicultural Center, I might do that. But I'll probably also shoot an email to this email address that I was able to find. All right. What others? Any others that are coming to mind? With a forewarning that you might be in charge of distributing them to these groups.
The NAACP.
Okay. Does anyone have contacts with the NAACP? Local chapter?
I do. I could do that.
Okay.
It might, yeah, that would be fine.
So this is Marie Taylor, board member. So I think when we had talked about this list, it was more focused on the hard copy distribution. And so this list does not limit us to who we may decide to forward the surveys onto within our own social, networks of organizations. Just so
Okay, yeah.
this is not the end all be all list. I think the focus was more on hard copies, so we shouldn't feel like we're trying to make the entire distribution list. Is just for clarification.
Yeah, definitely. And like for some of these, like for instance, if Bert Nash is willing to, reach out to their staff by email, it would be just a virtual link. But just to have some contact with these organizations was important.
This is Jane Gibson, board member. I'd just like to say that we should, to the extent possible, we should always prefer to send the link to send people to the Lawrence Listens. As somebody who's had to analyze huge data sets, we don't want to do this manually. We don't want to receive hundreds of hard copy surveys. We want them to be electronic to the extent that we can possibly get them there. So anybody that can be sent a link should be sent a link. I can understand putting hard copies in the library, places like that, but no KU student is without access to a link, to an internet, to a computer with internet access. So that should never be a hard copy at KU.
Yeah. And that's going to be the same for Haskell. We're all virtual this semester. So it would have to be a link.
I have a question though. I don't know what you you must have had this conversation when you were talking about sampling at KU. You'll be sampling people who are not, many people who are not from Lawrence. Does that matter to us?
I mean, students at KU have interactions with the police as well. So I think it's applicable to them.
Well, an issue there is they are with the KU police. That's their jurisdiction. It's a whole separate force than the Lawrence
yes and
force.
no.
So I don't know if that's.
If they're done.
Yes and no, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
It's both. It's both.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some interactions when they're out and about on the town off of campus.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay, are there any other additions? Any gaps?
Looks good. Thanks, Jenny. Really appreciate that.
And the timeline, board member Jenny Robinson, the timeline on this is I can share with the people who have taken responsibility for certain groups, share this document with them. It was just, can I do that individually, Brandon? So because there are 4 people, can I just share a document with 4 people? I don't want to violate any.
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Would you be getting additional feedback on the document? Like, would it be a collaborative document?
No, we would just be making notations about the date that materials were dropped off, date they were picked up.
I understand. I believe that would be okay from a public meetings standpoint. Tony, are you following? I might ask Tony to provide a quick opinion of that.
You can make one-way communications. I would not have all of the the members copied on communications, but if Commissioner Robinson wants to send out a document and then have updated information returned to her with no discussion or decision-making, just collecting information, I think that would be sufficient.
Okay. Board member Jenny Robinson. So I'll just send each of you a copy and you can return it back to me with edits, and then I can edit our main document. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Board Member Marie Taylor, I have a technical question. And along with the survey, we're kind of pushing this out in the timeline, but eventually we'll have to have a hard copies produced that then we'd be receiving and then distributing out. I mean, I think the key groups in the list are being targeted because we want to reach populations who may not have access to computers, right? So we'll have to have some sort of logistics in terms of implementing our grand plan to produce all these hard copies and get them to sites and then return to the city. And then for us to include an analysis, hopefully not so many that we're overwhelmed by all these paper copies, but still having this aspect was important to us. So yes, it might take a little bit more work, but at least for the particular groups of people in the community, we want to make sure that they get hard copies if that's the easiest way that they can have to respond.
Okay, very good. Board Member Jenny?
Yeah, so the way I envision this is really, for me, I'm going to reach out to each organization specifically and kind of tailor like the number of surveys dropped off, the format, per organization. But I'm wondering, once the survey has been completed, would we be able to request like a certain number of hard copies made by the city so that like each of us could come pick them up at some point to distribute?
That's a question for Brandon.
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. We can certainly help print copies. And so if you just let me know when you're ready to do that, then I can arrange for that. We have a large volume printer here at City Hall.
So we're not like overwhelming you with individual requests, Board Member Robinson. Would it be best to kind of just request a batch print of like
Yes.
50 maybe surveys be printed once we've obviously gone through the process of getting it all edited, and then the board members responsible for organizations can just kind of come pick them up
Yes.
as they can.
Yes. That's what I was planning on doing. And I guess, through Porter, we'll be well aware when the survey's ready. And so at that point, and I see Porter even replying on chat to me that he's prepared to help with printing. So what are there specific languages that you would like to see us print copies in? Spanish, Mandarin, Korean, any other specific languages?
Board Member Robinson, I think Spanish for sure. Maybe, print a certain number in Spanish, and we can just ask these organizations, how many do you estimate you'll need for copies in Spanish?
Okay.
So may I, Jenny,
Very good. Board Member Sanjay?
Board Member Sanjay Mishra, may I suggest as you're reaching out to these organizations, if you try to inventory, so what languages other than English, so we may have a reasonable idea. Whether it's 50 Spanish or 100 Spanish, I don't think we should print more than 250. That should be plenty surveys. Is my initial guess. I want to be proved wrong, but that's my initial guess.
Board Member Robinson, in my experience working at a nonprofit, especially right now during a pandemic, we might have really limited responses. So I think to not be surprised when that happens, but to hope for the best.
Yeah, okay. Very good. All right, so let's, thank you, Jenny. Really appreciate it. Stephanie?
Board Member Stephanie Littleton, I just kind of want to circle back so we kind of have some idea on timeline and what the board's thoughts are.
Where I'm going.
Okay. Because we really need to have some idea with how we're going to move all this forward. If we're going to do this expeditiously or if we're going to wait. So.
Right. So let me just put some dates out there that you're aware of. And again, we don't know the exact dates. Citygate's going to be engaging, but our next meeting is the 11th of February. Just putting that out there. Yes, Board Member Jane.
Board Member Jane Gibson. I may be misunderstanding, but I think I am gathering from Brandon, our options are to go now or wait until after the consultants are done, which could be much later, like months later. So I want to, if that's the case, then I want to argue for going now, staying the course, getting as much done as we can, learning as much as we can from the community about what they need to see, what they think about what we're doing, and any suggestions and recommendations they might like to make. I think it's a good time for us we have some momentum, and I would not like to see us just stop. I think that would be a mistake. I'd like to see us continue to try to learn from the community, and do that now rather than later. Because I think if we do it later, we're talking like a lot later.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I would agree with you, and I would agree with you because we're trying to stay focused on, what the role of the board is and get that kind of feedback from really the community, right? And I think what could be helpful, and Stephanie and Brandon and I talked a little bit about this too, is that if we could gather some information now, let's call it preliminarily, especially on what our focus is, going to the listening groups that Citygate engages will net a whole lot of other information as well. And not that I'm asking that we put a hold on the ordinance or finalizing the ordinance, but I think it would be really important for us to hear feedback from the community as well, to maybe do a final shape on the ordinance. And I'm just throwing that out there. Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson. This is just my view. Once the consultants are done, not even the city knows what they're going to do because they don't know what the consultants are going to recommend. So they could make really, really dramatic changes that could affect our ordinance a lot, and then we'd be sorry, but that seems pretty unlikely. They could make some small changes that might not affect us at all. My feeling is that, again, it's a part of the learning process to go forward and to think about this ordinance in light of all the things that we can learn about, other rules and laws and the city code and anything that we need to know about the police department's contract, their MOU with the union, all those things that might be important for us to understand much better at the end of the day, and maybe to shine a light or use that as a lens to examine this version. And I don't see us not doing that. I see the importance of becoming better versed as a board in all of these institutions that surround us. And this is an opportunity for us to do that, whether or not we decide to take a final draft of the survey to the city commission now or not. I honestly don't. I think based on what Stuart Boley had said, I don't think they'll look at it until they have their consultants report. But that doesn't mean that we should not do all that we can to have it ready And then if they make changes that affect the version that we produce, then, we'll change it, we'll tweak it, we'll adjust, we'll do what we have to do. But we will be better informed as a board. Better prepared for that process. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time and not doing anything that can get us ready for that moment. And we need to be getting ready for that moment, which isn't just about surveying the community. It's really about understanding more about these institutions around us.
Okay, very good, Jane. I see Stephanie's hand up.
This is board member Stephanie Littleton. Since this is kind of a good segue here, if I may kind of step in. I'm not sure if we're really, kind of where we're going to want to be at in our agenda for this, but it's a combination of what I'm going to ask of the board to think about with where Jane and both Tanya are going with. One is, do we do the survey now or do we do it later? The other is, and giving it some thought and some discussion with Brandon as well, with kind of our timeline to the Citygate's consultant study. I've thought about quite a bit. Okay, where are we at with our ordinance? What are we maybe missing? What are we not? So I'm just going to put this out there. Do we as a board, because we're getting close to on our next step here to talk about the ordinance and kind of get to a point where I think we're going to be okay with it, with where we're at right now anyway. But do we want to request city staff? And I'm going to segue into with consultant, the Citygate as well, but city staff to provide first and foremost a policy analysis of our revised ordinance. Do we want to do that now? Would we want to do that after the consultant study is complete? Basically looking to identify any loopholes, any barriers, any omissions regarding implementing our expectations and putting the revised ordinance into any motion, to allow us basically more oversight for transparency. That's what we're looking for. So are there things we're missing that we're not aware of? So maybe asking the city staff to do this analysis, considering the MOU, the police union's memorandum of understanding in light of the employee city handbook, city codes, and state laws. Where are there maybe areas of conflict that we don't know? We've kind of forged ahead and have done a lot of work, as we all know, to kind of get to where we are. But what is it that we may be missing? What we can't foresee?
Board Member Gibson.
This is Board Member Jane Gibson. I just can't. I can't strongly enough support what Stephanie is saying here. I think that this is hugely important to us. I had been thinking an awful lot about the MOU with the union. I mean, this is an area where we need to know where our proposal conflicts with that agreement between the city and the police union. We need to know, we haven't even asked that question. And I'm sure that there are other questions that we haven't thought to ask. And Stephanie is raising a lot of them here. The problem is we don't know what we don't know. And we need help figuring out what we have not thought of. And if you haven't thought of it, you don't know to ask about it. So for me, that's the real important part of what Stephanie is saying, is that we need the staff to tell us what we didn't think of, what we forgot, what didn't occur to us, what sorts of institutional rules we don't know about that are going to get in our way. We're not here to ruffle feathers and make waves, but we really want to do a good job here for the community and its relationship to the police department. And we really can't. Honestly, we don't know enough, to be sure that what we're proposing isn't just going to get shot down because there's stuff we didn't know to ask. There's stuff we didn't know to think about. So I would really very much appreciate that from the staff.
Okay, I'd like to take that and really pinpoint something that we've struggled with through this whole process. And again, we need to continue going forward and moving forward. But I think one of those issues certainly, because I do want to hear from the public on this in terms of community engagement, and that is, how do we imagine that complaint process, really. And I think that's critical and key to our role, in defining our role better, and then how that can be done in the spirit of what you're talking about, Jane, and that is, what are our limitations? What are our opportunities? We don't know what those are. So we can do the work that we think we need to do, you know, and make sure that there are clean processes and mapped out sound ways to really improve what our charge is. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what do we want to do at this point? Stephanie?
This is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. I'd like to add to that. I kind of threw in a little bit on Citygate, but I'd also like to consider maybe us making a motion as well tonight to engage Citygate basically in completing an analysis to address accountability for us. You know, we've talked off and on about our complaint review process, and we know there's a lot of concerns. And this is really a great opportunity for us to engage them and ask that they look into that in the master plan, which they may already be thinking to do that, but it'd be a good time to consider a motion on that as well.
Okay. Okay, so let me start on addressing some of this, and I consider us to be certainly on still agenda item number 3, and you know, we did get some more information off of agenda item number 5 from Brandon's presentation. In that I've heard from members of the board, we've heard from members of the board that we want to go ahead and keep the momentum going by going ahead and starting our process as soon as possible. In light and understanding that Citygate will be engaging in a community engagement effort. Certainly their intent is not specifically about the ordinance as ours is, and what our charge is and what our role and responsibility is. But that's what I'm hearing. I'm also hearing that from board member Stephanie Littleton and Jane Gibson, the need to look at, have an analysis done, perhaps by city staff, and even recommended Citygate, the consultants, to take a look, perhaps, and I hope I'm getting this correct, Stephanie, to maybe help us out in understanding the accountability to the citizens here and to the community through the ordinance. That's what I'm hearing. So where would you like to go from here in terms of a motion or an action item that the board went with? Board member Gibson?
Board member Jane Gibson. I have a question for Stephanie. Stephanie, I didn't understand what you were talking about. I guess I don't understand the specific meaning when you say you'd like Citygate to complete an analysis that addresses accountability for us. Are you talking, I'm not sure, to whom, do you mean our accountability to the community? Do you, or what? What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah, this is Board Member Stephanie Littleton, exactly, to the community, accountability, and looking into, and you know, some particular pieces of that would be obviously the complaint review process.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
To the public, yeah.
Marie has her
Board
hand.
member Marie and then Jane. Mm-hmm.
Board Member Marie Taylor. So I just wanted to chime in with a couple of comments. I think that we've been at this ordinance a while, and I think that the city attorney's office has been providing us as guidance along the way. So I don't think that we're way off the mark on what's contained in what we've laid out as potential additional duties of the board. So I don't think they would have led us this far astray. Basically, I think those probably, so they're on the call, so they could probably speak more to that. I don't disagree with the need to have some staff analysis, but that would happen inevitably when it goes up to the city commission. So this is really to reflect what we would like to see happen. If the city commission doesn't agree or thinks that we don't have the right to do what we want to do through this ordinance, then that's a different matter, and that's for them to take the council on that point. But I don't think it should change what the content is. And then secondly, it's not within the charge of Citygate to do an analysis of our particular ordinance. That's not really what they've been hired to do. I think, but more generally, they have been hired to look at various processes, including the complaint process and what a role of an oversight committee would look like, a civilian oversight committee. So I think that probably still falls within their charge, but not anything like a specific, section by section analysis of what we've decided to have as part of the ordinance. And that would really fall more with the city attorney's office, I assume.
Okay. All right, Stephanie?
Yeah, this is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. Yeah, good clarification, Marie. I didn't mean that they actually do an analysis from Citygate of our ordinance, but really looking at to address the systems of accountability and how that comes together for us as well. And then as far as, to your point with the city staff, I know we've asked for legal direction when we were revising the ordinance. My concern more is to what is it that we're missing, right? The blind spots, the omissions. So if I'm not out of order here, I guess I could ask Tony Wheeler or Randy to maybe chime in a little bit on this as far as asking for direction, if that would be something beneficial for us.
City Attorney Tony Wheeler. Thank you, Vice Chair Littleton. That is correct. We understand that your request was to review the draft ordinance for legality. And we really did limit our review to trying to bring into the best legal form your recommendations. We did not feel that we had the authority or the direction or the invitation to really deviate from the recommendations that you were making. So Randy is free to add to that, but that's what we believed our charge was, and that's what we tried to deliver.
This is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. Yeah, I would concur with what Tony says. We, in revising or making changes or in reviewing the ordinance that was presented to us, we were really focusing solely on the legality of the document and contents thereof. And as the board member Marie said, whether or not specific policy statements and ideas and concepts that are included in there is something that the city commission is going to approve, we do not know. But from a legal perspective, we've done the review of that already, and it looks fine to us, at least from a legal perspective.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson. One point, I'd like to clarify that I think that we understood well that you were using a legal lens and that's what we asked for and that's what we got back. And there was certainly no question that you were misleading us or not giving us proper guidance. You did exactly what we asked, and we are very, very appreciative of that. You've been nothing but really, really helpful to us. What I think Stephanie is saying and that I'm trying to support here is that there are things that we don't know to ask or we didn't know to ask. And so one for me is, when you were looking at our ordinance, did you, for instance, consider whether or not we had some conflicts with the MOU with the police union? That's not the same thing as the city code, is it? Or did you look at those kinds of peripheral contracts? That's not peripheral, it's quite central to what we want to do. Did you look at those kinds of things? And would it be possible for you to take a slightly different look at this ordinance, one that takes into account these larger sort of institutional frameworks that would have caused us not to realize, that we're gonna bump up against something huge. We don't need any surprises. We need to know what's out there for us. That's my point.
City Attorney Tony Wheeler, yes, we could collectively, analyze the ordinance from those perspectives as well. We'd be happy to do that.
That would be fantastic from my point of view.
Yeah, okay. Board Member Marie?
Board Member
Marie?
Marie Taylor. Board Member Marie Taylor. So I support this in concept, but I think that part of what we're doing in our role is presenting an idea, a different framework. And so that if the commission wants to do that kind of review and analysis with its own contracts, we're just advisory. So we're presenting them with a concept. But then City Commission then can ask its staff to do this kind of analysis that you're asking of now, and then determine whether they think what we've presented meets the requirements of other obligations of the city. But we're just advisory. So part of us, I know we want to be a little bit perfectionist about this and cover all bases. But what could happen is if we present this idea of this ordinance with additional powers for the board, and the City Commission receives advice from its staff about what possible conflicts exist, I assume they would send it back to us to consider those things that we just don't have knowledge of, because we're not the city government. We're the advisory group to the City Commission. So I don't think this is the last stop. How can I say this?
I think that's very well said. No, I think that's very well said, that this isn't the last stop. But the point would be to get that information. And we don't have, just because they come back and they say, well, there's a conflict here and here, doesn't mean that we necessarily have to change the concept or change the ideas. But we need to be prepared. We need to know where they are. We need to know where the landmines are. We have to know, if, for instance, they come back and say that we've got something in there that is really going to get some serious pushback, we may decide that it's so important to keep it that we don't make a change in the proposal, but we need to be prepared to make the case for it. And I don't want to send it over there and have them send it back to us and say, well, look, you missed this and this and this, when we could be prepared to make the case for it when it goes over. And they can still say, no, we're not the last stop. But I would like for us to be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. I saw Stephanie's hand up.
I know that ultimately, Citygate's master plan is going to come out in June. City Commission will be looking at that relative to our ordinance, and I just think that if we take this step now, we can kind of get ahead of the game here. Not a game, but getting ahead of it, as you know, just trying to see what those things might be and give us a bigger picture getting down that road, and maybe just doing this even preemptive for the City Commission as well. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I feel, just versus sitting back and waiting.
Okay, very good. Board Member Marie?
Board Member Marie Taylor, well, we have the meeting in February. We'll probably still have surveys out. So it seems like the timing would be to kind of delve into these potential issue spot ahead of time. But I just think there's no way that there's not going to be a back and forth where we get this sent back again to us once it goes up to the commission. And I also assume that the police union will also have an analysis that they'll present to the commission as well. Just looking back on the past history of this, when this ordinance was first put in place, it did not happen overnight. It took over some year. So, we need to learn some, but we won't put anything out there that's not, well researched, well thought through. But we can't guarantee perfection and that we've covered every possible objection.
I don't think anybody's looking. Well, sure, we're looking for perfection, but nobody thinks we're going to get that.
Okay, so let's. We need some kind of framed guidance direction in the form of a motion from the board with regard to this. Stephanie?
Hey, this board member, Stephanie Littleton, this is the motion I would propose, and I think I need to do two of them. I'm not sure, one for Citygate and one for the city staff. But, like to make a motion to ask that the city staff do a policy analysis of our revised ordinance to help us identify any loopholes, blind spots, barriers, if you will, any omissions regarding implementing our expectations of putting this revised ordinance into motion to allow us more oversight for transparency, for example. So that is my motion.
Okay, is there a second? Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson, I'll second the motion.
Okay, Board Member Gibson seconds the motion. Discussion. We've had a lot. Are we ready to vote?
We have one more,
Jane?
just Jane Gibson, board member. I would just add one last thing, and that is that there is no one, not Citygate certainly, that knows better than this staff what our intentions are, what we mean, because they've been at these meetings and they've listened to us and they've helped us all along this process. So nobody really is better prepared to look at this ordinance and ask the question, what is it that they want to do, and does this ordinance allow that? And that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the big overarching question I think that Stephanie's motion will cover, because it'll be a policy analysis that says, well, what did we miss? You know, where are our blind spots? What did we forget? So I think that they're the best people to do it.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Mhm.
Assistant City Manager Brendan Mcguire, just a reminder to call for public comment.
Very good, thank you. At this time, let's call for public comment. Okay, Mr. Kerr?
Okay, I'll try to give this my best shot at a lot of things to take in. I do agree with Board Member Littleton about this motion that hopefully will get vote yes. I don't got very much to say, but yeah, I do think that the city should do this. So yeah. Not very much, but yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you. Thank you for your feedback on that. Okay, any other feedback or any other comments? Okay, if not, we've got a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote? Okay, Sanjay? Yes.
Vote.
Yes, vote.
I'm
Okay,
ready to
very
vote.
good. Okay, all those in favor with the motion signify with an aye for a yes and nay for a no. Board Member Sanjay?
Sanjay Mishra, Board Member, yay.
Board Member Jenny?
Board Member Jenny Robinson, yay.
Board Member Marie?
Board Member Marie Taylor, yes.
Board Member Jane?
Member Jane Gibson, yes.
Board Member Bill?
Board Member Graybill, yay.
Board Member Stephanie?
Board Member Stephanie Littleton, yes.
Chair Salvini, yes. It's unanimous, 7 votes pass on that motion. Stephanie, I want to turn it back over to you. You mentioned you might have another motion.
Yes, thank you. Board Member Stephanie Littleton, thank you very much from the city staff. My second motion would be to engage Citygate Associates and ask they conduct an analysis to address systems of accountability on behalf of our board.
Okay, there's a motion by Board Member Littleton. Is there a second? Board Member Gibson?
Jane, you are muted.
Jane, mute.
Sorry. I'll second the motion, but I want to be sure that I understand the motion that we're asking Citygate. Are you asking them to look at the ordinance to say, does this manage our accountability to the community effectively? Is that what you're asking them to do?
This board member, Stephanie Littleton, yes.
Thank you. Then yeah, I second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to have Citygate do an analysis for covering accountability. Discussion, Marie?
Maria Taylor, board member. I think this is too vague to, in terms of like, I think I could say that you mean like the fact that we want to have oversight of the complaint, and then that satisfies or require like what we consider to be accountability for towards the community. It's like a rhetorical question though. So I mean, the thing is, they can't tell us this until like what, the end of June. So I'm confused about the timing. And then I'm also confused about whether we could, or I should say, can we frame this in a way that we can feel certain already fits within the scope of work that this contractor was hired by the city to perform? So I really think we need Brandon's help to kind of craft what we're asking them to do, because we may not have hired them to answer this question in the way that it's phrased. I think conceptually, it's probably wrapped up in all of what we're doing, but I think we have to be a little bit more specific and then to make sure we check with Brandon that it falls within the scope of what the city commission has in terms of expectations for this contractor.
Okay, Brandon, would you mind speaking to that, please?
Assistant City Manager Brendan Mcguire, I will do my best.
Thank you.
And if you'll bear with me a moment, I'm trying to pull up the contract. So I believe what Stephanie is requesting is a analysis of the existing systems of accountability that are in place, of which the Community Police Review Board is a component of that environment, that system, and to make recommendations, where best practices may not be currently utilized or could be implemented, identify potential areas of concern, problems, transparency issues, and fairness and equity issues, and so on. And that, from what all of my understanding of the contract we have in the scope of work, fits already squarely within the consultant's project scope. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure the motion, as I understand it, is necessary. Although reinforcing that message to the consultant is certainly appropriate.
Okay, Stephanie, I want to go back to you. Thank you, Brandon. What I'm wondering here is maybe and again, this is an ongoing process, and I know June is quite a way from this time, and we've got work to do until then, for sure. But I'm just wondering if what Citygate recommends at some point to make sure the ordinance fulfills the best practice in their scope of work, that type of analysis I could see happening. Like, so they're going to make these recommendations that a community police review board should be doing X, Y, Z, ABC in terms of best practices. And they cite all those best practices that we've even referred to and talked about last summer. And make sure that get some feedback from them to make sure that our ordinance, our policy, our intent, everything that we're doing really fits that, which I don't think we're too far away from that, but at least get those recommendations from them on how we can make our charge more solid. Just throwing that out there. Murray?
Board Member Marie Taylor, I have an idea. So I think that potentially what we could do is get instead of having a meeting where we're directing the Citygate to do something for us, we just say, let's have a collective recommendation of a concern that we would like the city staff to bring to Citygate and to include in their analysis for the city. And I think, you know, I think some of us have already participated in focus groups with Citygate. And so I think like individuals may have provided comments, but we've never collectively made like sort of like our wish list of things that we would hope that the Citygate vendor would do, you know, in terms of what relates to our work. So maybe that's what we could have a motion on. Like these are some principles that we would like the city staff to communicate to Citygate and have reflected in their final report to the city that are of interest to our board collectively. So that's my idea.
Okay. Feedback from the city staff?
Assistant City Manager Brendan Mcguire, that sort of feedback would be very helpful, yes, as Board Member Taylor described it.
Okay, Board Member Taylor?
Board Member Marie Taylor again. So for instance, like in the one-on-one that Jane and I were in with Citygate, we talked extensively about the needs for having a transparent complaint review process, and so that was our comments. But we can't speak for the board, so that is just, you know, the kind of feedback that we could give as individuals who happen to be on the board. So maybe what's missing is this element of us being able to collectively have a recommendation that represents the position of the board itself, not just our individual opinions about what we thought should be improvements for the police department.
Okay. Comments, feedback from the board?
This is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. I know I kind of get what her suggestion. It's kind of going away from what I was really, you know, suggesting that we do a motion, basically engaging them to address systems accountability, you know, with their police department study on behalf of their master plan process. And that's really kind of the big picture. You know, make sure they are addressing the systems accountability. Are they going to do that? Probably so, but we're engaging them, asking here, the board's coming to you, we're asking them to engage to make sure this is a big piece of the pie. That's really what I'm asking or I'm suggesting. Because I know that they have, back kind of to Marie's point, you know, they have a list of all the things that we've all covered with them to take into consideration. I mean, we could reiterate that, sure.
Okay, well, at this point, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Is there any more discussion? We do have public comment. Mr. Kerr?
Okay. So in this motion, I do think this will be helpful as a community member. It'll be helpful if there was, what I'm doing is giving you feedback. So the feedback they're going to give you is probably going to be stronger than my feedback, but you're getting feedback, and feedback's a really great thing to get, and especially for this particular thing. So that's what I wanted to say, that feedback is a really good thing, and I think that you should vote yes to this motion because you're going to get feedback, and feedback's a really good thing for this specific thing. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Well, it seems like I'm listening and bear with me here, to Stephanie in the motion to have Citygate do the analysis. I'm hearing from Brandon that in terms of the total engagement and scope of work that Citygate's doing, that it's assumed that will be there, that there will be that effort to address the best practices, perhaps review and look at what we already heard from us, of course, but perhaps take a look at our ordinance to give us feedback to make sure that it's consistent with what their recommendations are going to be for best practices and how an ideal, at least in this community, board could serve the public. And that might dovetail into what you were talking about too, Marie, in terms of perhaps being embedded in their scope of work and then get some feedback from them on that going forward with the ordinance. Or am I completely off base here? Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson. I think the fact that we seem to have multiple interpretations of the motion and of what we think that the motion ought to entail and what we think Citygate can do and what they're already probably going to do. There's so much confusion around the motion. I would ask Stephanie to revise the motion, to withdraw it, and then revise it so that we all have real clarity about what it is you would like to have happen here. I'm sorry, I feel a little confused too, Stephanie, about exactly what this is. And what Tanya just said didn't at all relate to what I thought you said. So I need some help here.
This is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. I was going to actually ask Marie if she can incorporate what I'm asking for and what she's asking for and just pull that together. Because she was eloquent about what she was asking for, and mine was pretty simplistic compared to that. So,
Board Member Marie Taylor, I'm going to give it a shot. So I think if we say motion is to direct the staff to communicate to Citygate, the city's contractor, the board's desire to have within its review of the city's police department analysis of the board's proposed ordinance charge, the charge within of the board within that ordinance, and provide recommendation on any changes that it would recommend that would reflect best practices.
That was good. Yes, I think that incorporated everything. What are your thoughts, Stephanie?
Yeah, this Board Member Stephanie Littleton, I think that was really well done, because I think in those best practices, all that wraps up into that accountability piece. All of it does. So yes, very good.
Okay, so is there any action you want to take on your motion in the second that we have then, Board Member Littleton?
This Board Member Stephanie Littleton. Tanya, sorry, I'm not sure what you just asked of me. Reword the motion.
To withdraw your motion?
Oh, I withdraw it and accept Marie Taylor's motion.
Board Member Marie Taylor, I guess I've made my first motion. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. I don't have a Robert's Rules of Order book here, but thank you. In the spirit of really getting to what intent is here, I think you're deferring to then Marie. Marie has created the motion. And Sanjay, was that a second?
Yes, that's a second. Sanjay Mishra.
Okay. We're up for discussion. Bill Graybill, are we good on our rules of order here?
This is Board Graybill. Man, I'm so confused to do whatever you're going to do.
Okay, we've had the motion withdrawn by Stephanie Littleton. We now have adopted a new motion that was read by Marie Taylor. It's seconded by Sanjay Mirza. And really the intent there is to test me on this, have the city staff visit with Citygate to review our ordinance and provide feedback on best practices that are in line with the work that Citygate will be doing. Is that correct? In a nutshell? Okay.
Madam Chair.
And
Well, I'm sorry, I did not mean
Yes.
to interrupt.
No.
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire, I just want to ask a point of clarification regarding the timeline, that this would be coming back with the consultant's final report, consistent with that timeline. Excellent, thank you. That doesn't need to be included in the motion, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Thank you. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, so I think, any more discussion? I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor, again, yay. All those opposed, nay. I'll start with Board Member Sanjay.
Board Member Sanjay Mishra, yay.
Board Member Jenny.
Board Member Jenny Robinson, yay.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor, yes.
Board Member Jane.
Board Member Jane Gibson, yes.
Board Member Bill.
Board Member Graybill, nay.
Board Member Stephanie.
Board Member Stephanie Littleton, yes.
Okay. And Chair Salvini, yes. We've got 6 yays, 1 nay, and the motion passes. Okay. I think we're ready to really cross off 3 and 5 and move to back up to number 2, if we could real quickly. Is that with everyone? Pretty good. All right. So we're looking at the draft ordinance, and really very, very quickly, this is, thank you staff for once again listening to us at the last meeting and making those minor tweaks and assure us that this new ordinance really reflects those changes. So this is the ordinance we're going to go forward with to get the feedback and then come back and roll up our sleeves and work on it again. So the draft ordinance board, does it reflect the changes that we discussed in the last meeting? Randy, do you want to speak to it for just a second?
Yes, this is Randy Larkin, Deputy City Attorney. I don't know that there were too many changes from the last meeting. We incorporated the best that we could, and this is the version that we believe captured what the board wanted us to do at the last meeting. So
Okay,
hopefully
very
we've
good.
done that.
Okay, Board Member Stephanie, thank you.
Yeah, this is Board Member Stephanie Littleton. I think the only thing that was really updated was Sanjay had asked for the second half of 2502 to be removed.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, it was pretty minimal.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, thank you very much. Brandon, do we need a vote on this?
This is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. We really put this back on the agenda just because of those final minor tweaks. I would suggest a very simple motion to confirm that this reflects the board's intent as discussed in the previous meeting.
Okay, very good, thank you. Is there a motion, Bill?
So moved. Board Member
Thank you. Second? Okay, thank you, Bill. Second? Sanjay is seconded. All those in favor of accepting the ordinance as it was yet prepared again? Board Member Sanjay? Yay or
Board Member
nay?
Sanjay, yay.
Board Member Jenny?
Board Member Jenny Robinson, yay.
Board Member Marie?
Board Member Marie Taylor, yes.
Board Member Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson, yes.
Board Member Bill?
Board Member Graybill, yay.
Board Member Stephanie?
Board Member Stephanie Littleton, yes.
Chair Salvini, yes. That passes unanimous, 7-0. Okay, we'll move forward then to the Police Department engagement report.
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Really, this was provided as kind of a receive and file sort of report to follow up on the previous request. Captain McKinley is here if there are any questions about it. Otherwise, we don't have a presentation prepared. It was mainly just following up on that request.
Okay, very good. Questions from the board? Sanjay? No? Okay. If there are no questions, then I want to thank you very much for submitting the report to us. Appreciate it a lot.
You're welcome.
Okay. Then the update on Citygate and Associates, I believe we did cover that. Are there any other additions? Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire that we might need to touch base on?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I'll just reiterate that we're providing the same update to the City Commission next Tuesday evening. And Stuart Gary, the lead consultant, will be on that meeting. So I'd encourage everybody to watch. That's going to be on the City Manager's report. So it could be a little bit later in the evening, but you can always go back and watch that on the video as well. Just a very high level status update on the project to make sure that everybody is aware of especially the next phase of public engagement starting soon. And on that note, I would like to encourage the board members, as you think of people in groups that we should get FaceTime with as part of this process, please feel free to forward any recommendations you have onto me, and we'll incorporate that in our plan.
Okay, very good, Brandon. I think I would like to also encourage everyone to go ahead and spend some time looking at to participate and engage with the City Commission meeting to learn more about Citygate. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank you all for spending time with Citygate. I think the feedback was received well. And Brandon, do you want to comment on that very briefly?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. Well, to be quite honest, the feedback is being kept confidential. The consultant.
Of course, but
yes. Well, and that's just to say that your conversations with the consultant were not shared with me or anybody else on staff. So, yes, they had very good meetings and spoke very highly of the board members' experience and your acumen. And I know that they've also met with each of the city commissioners and are working on meetings with police command staff and on down through that department as well. So lots and lots of conversations going on. They're getting oriented to Lawrence very quickly. And I know it was very helpful to get FaceTime with each of you. Thank you for squeezing that in around the holiday season. I know that that's always a very hard time to get rolling on a project. But your flexibility in scheduling those meetings was very helpful and very much appreciated.
very good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you you sending that message. Okay, and then do you want to briefly talk about item number 6 and why it was removed?
Sure. The last item we had originally scheduled an executive session with the board to follow up on a request for information from a previous meeting. And this is a stretch for us. Admittedly, this would have been, to any of current staff's knowledge, I believe the first executive session with, closed session with an advisory board. We do that with the city commission, but I'm not aware of any advisory board or other, other appointed board body engaging in a closed session. And so the staff was trying to be responsive to the board's request, and we had a level of discomfort and looking at it again and comparing it, this approach to our policies and ordinances as currently written. We just felt like it was the best advice to not go forward with the closed session this evening, which is why we've stricken it from the agenda.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Jane? You're on mute.
Yeah,
Jane?
that's the,
Yeah, thanks.
sorry, Board Member Jane Gibson. Brandon, what was the issue you were going to follow up on?
This was a request from board members to review complaints against police officers. And the challenge there is working with personally identifiable information without code authority to do so or policy support to do so.
So you're talking about police officers' names? Or what is the personally identifiable information, complainants' information, or what?
It could be any of that, yes. But especially personnel information.
We have there has to be a way for us to learn about how the police department conducts its investigations, and one good way is to look at some of those investigations, and I think that was probably the intent of our questions. That these are questions that we've been asking since I got on the board, actually, was, what kinds of investigations do you do on what kinds of complaints, and we've not been able to learn that. And that seems like a pretty big gap in our knowledge base, I would say. So there has to be some way for us to be able to review those complaints or review the investigations without violating confidentiality.
Confidentiality.
So one possibility is to, at least for the purposes of just teaching us how investigations are conducted, not to give us files that we're going to review, but these are completed investigations. For those purposes, I can't think why the names couldn't be redacted. I think we have a different issue if we're talking about redacting names in the complaints that we hope that we're going to get to see later on. But I don't know why there should be, if we're just trying to understand that process, and maybe I've misunderstood what other people wanted this information for. That's what I wanted. I want to understand the investigation process. Why couldn't that information just be redacted?
Yes, this is Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire. I really don't want to get into too much of the details of that information, especially because that was treated by city staff with a high enough level of confidence that we were considering having discussions about it in closed session. I will say though that we're certainly not opposed to helping the board members learn about and understand how complaints are processed and investigated. And so we'll pledge to continue to work on a way to do that. We just don't feel comfortable with the approach that we had originally planned when we created this particular agenda item.
And that might be, I think I mentioned earlier, how do we do this? How does this get done? And again, it's a late night right now, but I think this needs to be continued. How do we arrive at that spot of what we're wanting to do with regard to complaints, and how, without violating confidentiality? I think you said that, in a very wonderful way, Jane. But still understand that and be assured that those kinds of complaints and the investigations that are occurring, that these things are being addressed and handled. Again, these are the conversations they're going to be tough conversations that I think we need to talk about going forward, concurrent to the work that we're doing. Jane?
No, Bill's had his hand up a while. I just wanted you to call him Bill.
Okay, Bill. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Well, this is Board Member Grable. I'm confused. When I saw this, the way I'm reading it, maybe I can't read, but it looks to me like it says recess into executive session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss a personnel matter involving a city employee. I didn't think this board had any employees.
Right.
I don't even know why this is on there to begin with. Maybe Mr. Mcguire can enlighten me a bit.
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire, the Kansas Open Meetings Act provides very limited justifications for a closed session, and that was one of them. That, like I said, in trying to be responsive to the board's request for information, we attempted to use, but upon further review, do not feel comfortable going forward with that.
So this involved a policy-making decision, not an employee. Is that correct?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I see Tony.
Well, the agenda says that we're going to recess into an executive session to discuss a personnel matter involving a city employee. I guess I'm confused about that because it doesn't sound like you intended to discuss a city employee, but you intended to discuss how this board was going to get information and policies involving this board. Was that the intent?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire, I'm going to ask Tony Wheeler to jump in here, please.
Good evening, City Attorney Tony Wheeler. There was a request to understand or review information about complaints about police officers. And after further review, the ordinance doesn't currently give this board the authority to review personnel information of employees except when there is a complaint, or excuse me, an appeal of a complaint. So after further reflection, we decided that we were not in a position to recess into executive session under this provision of the Kansas Open Meetings Act for an executive session. I think that Brandon is correct. If there is an interest in understanding how investigations are performed, we can certainly ask the police department to provide that sort of information going forward. So I apologize for the confusion. We were working very hard to try to be responsive to the board and provide information. We analyzed it from many different angles. We tried a lot of different approaches. And then after further reflection, we decided that, it would not be appropriate at this time with the ordinance as it is currently written to proceed with an executive session. Now, the ordinance may be amended in the future, and there may be an ability to, certainly the ordinance will be amended in the future, and you may have the authority to get additional information. But we don't have that currently.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Jane and Sanjay?
I think Sanjay got there before me.
Oh, okay,
I beat you
Sanjay.
to the poll then. Thank you, Jenny. This is Sanjay Mishra, board member. That's very interesting, Tony, that I hear from what I heard from you, because that was going to be my question, is are you telling us that we cannot look at any complaints? But you're saying the ordinance is currently written, yes, we cannot look at any complaints. So basically then this opens the question, how many complaints have been blocked from coming to the board? This is not a good state of affairs, is the way I look at it.
Okay. Bill?
In light of what the city attorney just told me, it appears.
Sorry, Jane.
I'm sorry. You want me to go?
No, go ahead, Bill.
It appears to me that this item has been taken care of, and I would make a motion, we move on down the agenda and address this bigger issue that I couldn't tell what it was all about at a subsequent meeting when we're all on the same page and have some thoughts put together about where we're going with it. That's my motion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Stephanie?
This board member, Stephanie Littleton, to Bill's kind of point, So I guess, and I'm not going to ask city staff for this because I've already asked them, we have a motion for them to conduct a policy analysis on our behalf. And so I'm just making kind of a statement to the board that, I hear loud and clear that I know our ordinance says we can only see complaints if they're appealed. So I understand completely, what they're saying here. My concern is with the way we've revised the ordinance, and that's the ask for, policy analysis for many reasons. Is there going to be any concerns going forward? And so I'm comfortable with that we've asked that motion that they're going to delve into this.
Okay, Board Member Marie?
So as a point, there's this number 6 is not on the agenda. It was stricken. So I don't know why we have a motion on an item that was stricken. So, and then secondly, I don't feel like I need to look at a complaint file that's confidential. What would be ideal, and from what I would request, is that we have them present their implementation strategy, how they actually process complaints. Not that I have to look at an actual complaint. I think that's what's missing, is they don't have any documented protocol for how they do the intake, how they flow it through their system, how they decide yes or no, what are the standards. I mean, just some written documentation that describes their process. And so that's what I'm hoping Citygate will tell them as well.
Okay. Bill? Your motion's still on the floor?
Yes, it is, and it either needs a second.
Yes, it does.
Did I have a second?
I'm looking for a second. Okay, I don't see a second, so the motion is dead. I saw some hands. Jane.
Board Member Jane Gibson, as someone who has asked for that information about process, I heard Tony say that the staff could help us get that information. And so I would like for this board to ask the staff to do that so that we can understand what the process is in, I guess, in investigating complaints, which would include intake and the decision-making from that point forward to the final outcomes of the investigation process. We've been asking for that since we got here. So if we could get some help from staff, that would be really terrific. I don't know do you need a vote from this board to go forward with that? Or what do you need from us so that you could give us this information?
Assistant City Manager Brandon Mcguire, I might jump in here. No, we do not need a motion. I think we understand, and actually, even though this wasn't a scheduled discussion, this has been helpful feedback. We've been trying to work within, what we understood was the board's desire, and trying to accomplish that, which has been very, very challenging. We've really been trying hard. Tony's been trying hard, police staff even. And it's been very challenging. So this is actually very welcome information and detail for us. I apologize if we have not been responsive to that same request in the past, but I think that we understand it well, and we can follow up in the near future with information that's responsive to this request.
Thank you. It wasn't this staff that didn't respond. This staff has been very, very helpful, very responsive all along.
Board Member Stephanie?
Yeah, this board member, Stephanie Littleton, no apology truly needed. I know the staff has worked really, really hard to try to bring this because I was the original ask, and it's grown through the growth of this board, the necessity. So from the A to Z point of intake to the outcome. So truly appreciate Tony and Randy, your assistance, and Brandon. So yeah, if we could have some assistance to kind of get the big picture from intake through, that would be really helpful.
Oh yeah, okay, absolutely.
Brandon, I'm sorry, was it?
Oh, Assistant City Manager Brendan Mcguire. I was checking with Captain McKinley just to make sure there was nothing else
Okay.
that he needed to insert.
Okay. Thank you. Marie?
And just Marie Taylor, board member, just as a clarification, if the city attorney can clarify that if the ordinance, as we've proposed it, is approved and adopted by the city, and it does have this ability for us to look at complaints, that we would expect that when those were being discussed by the board, they would be in executive session, and it would be under this exemption because the city employee in question would be the police officer.
City Attorney Tony Wheeler, yes, that is how the ordinance is drafted.
Okay. Very good. So I think we're good going forward then? Any other comments, questions, or clarifications? Okay, if not, thank you all very much. Really a fruitful evening. We are scheduled to meet February 11th at 7 o'clock. Okay. And is there a motion? Jane?
Board Member Jane Gibson, motion to adjourn.
And
Is there a second? Oh, Sanjay.
Stephanie wants to say something. Stephanie wants
Oh,
to say something.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, you're muted.
Stephanie, you're on mute.
Sorry, in Wilton. I think the last thing we just need to probably talk about is, I think we had notification that our new DA was going to be available for our February 11th meeting.
Right.
If we are good for that, we can go forward and let her know.
Assistant City Manager Brandon McGuire.
Yeah.
Yes, DA Valdez has confirmed that she's interested in meeting with the board on the February meeting. So
Okay.
if there are any specific questions you would like for us to pass on, I mean, you all are certainly free to contact her directly, but if you'd like our assistance in doing that, then we're happy to help.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, Marie?
Marie Taylor, board member, I suggested that each of us send Brandon one question. Maybe there'll be overlap, but at least we should have a few
You're
questions.
just such a workhorse. You are a workhorse. Okay.
One question, and it probably will overlap with others. At least give us something for them to work with so we're all not just staring at each other.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, there was a motion by Jane and a second by Sanjay to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify with a yay. Board member Sanjay,
Yay.
Jenny,
Board Member Jenny Robinson, yay.
Marie,
Yay. Marie Taylor, board member, yay.
Jane,
Board Member Jane Gibson, yay.
Bill,
Board Member Graybill, yes.
Stephanie,
Board member Stephanie Wilton, yes.
and Chair Salvini, yes. Motion passes with 7 votes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thanks
Good
for
to
all-
see you all. Hey, I got my first vaccine today. Yay.
Congrats.
Hey,
That's awesome.
That's worth celebrating.
excited. I know.
All right.
I know, I'm going to. All right, we'll see you all. Bye.